Well, hello, and thank you so much for choosing to spend some time with me. My name is Kevin Frankish, and we continue recognizing Men's Mental Health Month this month. My guests this episode are from the Buddy Up program, a kind of peer support group for men and their mental health. But first, I wanted to share a few stories with you making mental health news. These are compiled by our summer student, Maria Sandor. She is studying psychology with an interest in neuroscience and scours the internet every morning for us for items pertaining to the latest discoveries when it comes to mental health. And this first story, to me, is such an exciting discovery. This is a story that I think needs to get a lot more play. Several psychiatric disorders share the same root cause. Researchers recently discovered that 8 different psychiatric conditions share a common genetic basis. And what are these different illnesses? They are autism, ADHD, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, Tourette syndrome, obsessive compulsive disorder, and anorexia. So all of these mental health illnesses that affect millions and millions of people may have a commonality in them. And what this does is it perhaps one day paves the way for us to be able to treat multiple illnesses all at once. Indeed, can't wait to see where that study goes. There's been some stories about multitasking, something I think I'm really good at, but apparently I'm not, and it's also zapping my energy. The human brain is not wired to multitask, we find out. It can concentrate on one thing at a time. And when we think we're multitasking, such as texting and talking to someone or watching a show and eating it all at the same time, we're not. We're just switching from task to task to task very quickly. We're not concentrating on any one of them at great length. So not only is this causing problems for us by increasing our stress? Over time, intensive multitasking, as with media usage, may increase susceptibility to mental health challenges like anxiety and depression. It's also, according to this story, zapping our energy. Mark Travers writes about the world of psychology for Forbes.com. He came up with some habits that are quietly draining our energy, such as scattered attention. We have all these, if you will, if your brain was a browser, we have all these tabs open, and we're concerned with all the tabs at the same time. Researchers found that people who engage heavily in media multitasking often perform poorly on attention tasks, despite believing, like me, that we're good at multitasking. There's trivial choices as well. Worries over what I'm going to wear, what I'm going to order for takeout today. All these items that we stress over, and we're doing just that. We're stressing over them instead of just saying, "Oh, there's a lot of choices there. I think I'll make this one choice." Instead of this decision fatigue that Mark talks about. I wanted to bring one more story to your attention. This story is very scary. We know about the problem with microplastics. We know that it's in our food. We know it's in our water. There are enough microplastics in our brain, apparently, enough microplastics to make a plastic spoon. Now, data is coming in with new research that is suggesting that microplastics could be contributing to rising rates of depression, dementia, and other mental health ailments across the globe. Very scary what our environment is possibly doing to our health, especially our mental health. All right, that is a look now at some of our health stories and mental health stories, and thanks to Maria once again for compiling those. Now on to my guests, who lead the Buddy Up campaign, an incredible peer support group for men. I'd like to welcome Seth McVitie. He is the lead for the Buddy Up program, and Robert Olson, who is the research librarian. Thank you to both of you joining us today.
Thanks so much for having us. We appreciate it.
All right, so let's get into the Buddy Up program itself, because it's a really simple idea that can be so incredibly effective. Tell me a little bit more about it, Seth.
Sure. Yeah. Buddy Up, really what it is, it's a men's suicide prevention program. So what it does is it seeks to promote authentic conversations among men and their buddies. And as you mentioned, it's simple. And that's a key component to the project. Is often when people are thinking about suicide prevention, they're looking for these complicated or overhauls that they need to do, but really it can start with those authentic conversations.
All right, we're going to get more into those conversations and how you initiate those conversations or facilitate them. But I want to talk a little bit first about the need for such a program. And Robert, we talk about men's mental health quite often, different than women's mental health, simply from the fact that men are unique in the way that a lot of them don't seem to want to look for help or ask for help.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the 3-to-1 ratio has already been talked about. Men die by suicide 3 times more than women, and our latest statistics in Canada bear this out from 2022. And the majority of these suicides occur in the highest demographic within men are from the ages of 45 to 64. But what this is rooted in is men are socialized, to be self-reliant, strong, and stoic, and really not to talk about our emotions. And when we mask our stress and often deal with our emotional pain through harmful behaviors and actions, we also tend to, isolate ourselves when things aren't going well instead of seeking help. So
it's a matter of we get told, suck it up, walk it off a lot.
Exactly, and showing emotion is a sign of weakness, as is asking for help in our society. So when men do decide to seek help, sometimes we're often underserved by our traditional health and social service sectors. So it's a landscape we're trying to change, I guess.
Do you think a lot of that has to do with the fact, because I guess it's sort of a downward spiral, men don't ask for help as much, therefore perhaps the services aren't available there for them as much because they're not asking for help as much?
Yeah, I think there's a direct relationship between those two. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think the more men, the stigma is reduced, and the more normalized it is for men to seek help, then you'll see the services grow accordingly.
Are we making any headway, do you think, Seth?
Yeah, for sure. I think, on a grand scale, sometimes it can be harder to see, but on one-on-one relationships, you can see that change, because really having those conversations, and often what I'll run into, I talk to a lot of men, and, they're more likely or more willing to help a buddy than they are to help themselves. And so that's what we look to utilize on Buddy Up. We're not going in and be like, you need to change who you are or anything, but it's like, you know what? You are willing to help a buddy, then check in with him, see how he's actually doing. And in doing so, one, you're helping to reduce the stigma for him, showing that this is an okay conversation to have, but also shows him that he can check in with his buddies and also talk to you about how he's actually doing.
And I remind our listeners and our viewers that we are going to be talking about suicide, as you are already well aware. And I also always want to remind people that 988 is a service here in Canada that is 24/7, 365, and they're ready to listen. If you find yourself in crisis, if you find yourself triggered by anything, even if you have a concern, 988 is the place to call. You will get a listening ear, and you will get a non-judgmental ear. So I just really want to emphasize that. So let's talk a little bit about things that men can do in the Buddy Up program, or simply by using some of the ideas from the Buddy Up program in their own lives. What do you find, Seth, is the most effective way that men can help other men?
Yeah, well, what we do is we get individuals and organizations to sign up as champions of Buddy Up. And really, that's just individuals, organizations that want to have these conversations or are willing to promote it. So there's multiple ways that I've seen people get involved. It's through participating, like we do have our campaign portion, which is really about relationship building, holding events or activities, just really providing those opportunities to come together. Second way I've seen it is through promotion. So sometimes people just want to get the message out there. Maybe it's on social media or posters in the workplace or having those conversations in their networks. Learning is another big one through educating themselves further on suicide prevention, learning how to have those conversations, figuring out what resources are available for those that might be struggling. And then we've also just seen some people support the campaign through donations or becoming sponsors, and seen lots of great ways that people have done those.
Yeah, the website is buddyup.ca. If you want to consider sponsoring the program, find out more about it, go to buddyup.ca. And I guess when it comes to learning, Robert, that's where you sort of come in. You've got to find out the facts and figures, because you have to convince men that there actually is a problem. Do you ever have difficulty in a guy sort of, or guys in general, just sort of saying, it's not that big a deal?
I think when we first initiated this program back in 2019, there was less buy-in and less belief that in the widespread nature of the problem. But I think in the last few years, there is more, I would say, general acceptance by men that there is an inherent mental health problem and susceptibility to suicide. So I believe there's less a stigma to talk about it, but still, perhaps not the ideal where men will step forward, like second nature, to get the help that they need. We're just not there yet, and that's why our program, I think, is helping in the sense of, as Seth alluded to, men helping. We're more apt to help our fellow men than to help ourselves. So it's kind of an intermediary step, maybe.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I know that when I do a lot of mental health talks, that it's the women that show up, or it's the women that listen. And I find myself, if I need to get some information out about men's mental health, is I got to talk to them. I got to say, I need you to get a message to your husband, your father, your brother, your boyfriend, your friend about their mental health. Are men listening to you, or do you find a lot of women are coming to you for some advice and help?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. Definitely, we do recognize that women do approach us more often because they're worried about the men in their lives. But also, when I'm out in public or holding events or anything like that, guys are willing to have conversations. And sometimes it's because I have a bit of a banner behind me that says suicide prevention. I've had people open up about their struggles. They do talk about those that are in their life that are having problems. So I think they're aware. But it's just, how do they have that conversation without kind of having that feeling of like, oh, I can't handle this myself, or I'm weak, or anything like that. And I think part of the conversation that we're looking to change is that, vulnerability isn't a weakness. It really is a strength. And it's important to have somebody that you can be vulnerable to.
Yeah, and that's got to be something in your mind, is how do you get someone to start a conversation, but not sound, weird. And that's the way they're going to feel. A lot of times they're going to say, oh, you know what, that's talking about feelings, things like that. I don't know if Bob wants to talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. Like there definitely can be, especially if you've never talked to a buddy about this before, about his feelings, or maybe you think he's having thoughts of suicide and you've never talked about that before, it can be awkward. And that's okay. And that's what we tell men is maybe it's awkward, but just push through. It's an important conversation to have. You need to talk to your buddies and check in on them. Maybe you're the only person that would have that conversation with them, or the first person that has asked them about it. And so just embrace the awkwardness, recognize that maybe it will be, it may not be, but that it's important to have.
Okay, so let's get into it. How do I, first of all, what are some of the warning signs that maybe I need to have a conversation with my friend?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing, there can be many different warning signs, but the main thing that I always promote people to focus on is changes in behavior. What's not normal for that person? Or so it could be anything from, maybe they're drinking more than often, or maybe they're appearing a bit more tired or distant, or it can be simple things like that. And those few items I mentioned, those may not scream like, oh, this person's thinking about suicide, but there are changes in behavior, and you should be asking yourself, why is that change happening? And so that's an important thing to focus on is why is that change happening? Because maybe I should ask and check in to see if something's going on.
So let's how do you begin this conversation?
I think there's kind of two parts there. One is, where are you going to have this conversation? You may not want to have it in front of a group of people where this individual wouldn't be willing to open up. You want it more secluded or somewhere where they feel comfortable. Is there a regular place you are? Maybe you go out for drinks, or maybe you're in the car driving. We've seen the car a great place to talk, because some of the factors that we see is men are more likely to talk about how they're actually doing or their emotions. One, if they don't have to stare at each other, kind of that eye to eye, but also if their hands are busy. And so cars are a great place. One person is driving. There's no obligation to kind of be staring at each other. You're kind of side by side. So it creates a welcoming environment.
I've never thought about that. You want to have conversations that deal with emotions and feelings eye to eye, but if that's going to create an awkwardness and create a barrier, I never thought about having a car where, you can glance at each other, but at the same time, you can still just look straight ahead.
Yeah, for sure. Because it feels less of like an investigation or that you're kind of being interviewed or anything, but it's really just buddies having a conversation. And I think that's why that format is really important.
All right. So how do you start it? What am I saying? Hey, what's your mental health today, Bob?
It can be simple check-ins. I mean, if you've noticed some of those changes in behavior, just mention those. Be like, hey, buddy, I noticed that you've been drinking a bit more than usual. Is everything okay? Or, hey, you've been a bit more tired or distant lately. Is everything all right? Just mentioning what you've noticed. One, it shows that you're aware of them and changes that they're going through. But also provides them an opportunity to explain those. But don't shame or blame them for those actions. Like if they are drinking a bit more than usual, don't kind of blame them for that. Just mention that you've noticed it and then check in to see if they're okay.
And I guess as well, Robert, that this is where a lot of the research comes in too, because there's always fears people have that if they mention the word suicide, they're going to give somebody ideas, or if they talk to someone about their mental health, they're going to shut them down. What does the research say though about the types of conversation you can have?
Oh yeah, it definitely talking about suicide is a positive thing if one is experiencing suicidal thoughts. So talking about it is not going to put the idea into someone's head. In fact, it can act as a release, as a proactive measure, just to vent almost, just to
almost as though, oh, thank goodness someone wants to talk to me about this.
Exactly, yeah. So it can have a therapeutic effect for the individual.
The thing you emphasize, and I've seen you emphasize in some of your literature and on your website, that you're not a therapist, and you shouldn't expect yourself to be a therapist. Explain that to me, Seth.
Yeah, I think that's one of the goals of Buddy Up is recognizing that, you know, in having these conversations, we're not training you to be a professional. Really, it's just about being a buddy. That's who you are, and just stick at that. Be that friend, be that support. But one thing that we do ask is that you have some resources that you can direct people to. You mentioned one at the beginning, 988. That is a great national resource. People can call or text it 24/7. And then, you're recognizing these changes in behavior. You're closest to him and able to see those, but you don't have to fix it. And sometimes guys are hesitating to have this conversation because they feel like, do I have to fix it? Or if this individual opens up that they are having struggles, do I have to solve all that for them? But the answer is no. You're just allowing them the opportunity to open up, but then direct them to resources. And if 988 is one of those, that's great.
So now that this program has been running for a few years, have either of you come across any prime examples of how the program has been effective? And dare I say, do you think maybe you've saved some lives?
Yeah, I think we've seen some great ways that people are utilizing Buddy Up. A couple examples that I have. One is an individual came across us and he saw the need for this conversation to be promoted and had. And so he brought it to his supervisor at work. He's like, I found the suicide prevention campaign. I think that we should talk about it. And so that supervisor brought it into their safety meetings. And that kind of went further and further into that organization. Now that every new employee in their onboarding package is exposed to Buddy Up and suicide prevention. And for me, that just is a huge culture change that this, as somebody walking into a workplace, if within the first few days you're learning about suicide prevention and that my workplace is open to talking about this, it shows this is an okay conversation to have here, but also that there's resources, there's support. And what an amazing way to walk into an organization and have that available.
Yeah, and I guess, too, that a lot of times it's in our nature, guys want to fix things. And if you have a buddy who's saying, oh, I'm having trouble with such and such, oh, you know what you should try? You should do this, this, and this, and let me get my toolkit out and let's fix that together. Ladies are always telling us, stop trying to fix things. Sometimes listening is what's important. Robert, any example, or can you just sort of say just how important listening is? Because we think, oh, well, if we're going to be a Buddy Up, we got to say, okay, here's what I see as the problem, here's where your fix is. But how important is just the listening?
Oh, it's absolutely crucial, and the interplay between yourself and your buddy, it's allowing this individual to describe how they're feeling, and just having someone nod or validate their struggles is huge. So.
And that validation is important as well, because at the same time as men are like, well, I don't want to seek help because I just want to walk it off. I can deal with this myself. At the same time, we can often think, well, my problem really isn't that serious, and it really isn't that big a deal, not realizing that these problems can grow and grow and grow, Seth.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people can feel like they're a bit of a burden on others, but I think that's why it's also important to have this conversation around, is that we're reducing the stigma, but also showing that, this is okay to talk about. We do want you to talk about it. Don't just kind of suffer in silence, or kind of, that's one of the warning signs of men in suicide prevention. As often they do isolate themselves. It's like, we don't want you to isolate. We do want you to talk to us. And it's not going to change how we feel about you or think of you as less of a man. We recognize that everyone has these struggles, but we're here to support.
So let's talk about how people can get involved. Let's talk about the website, buddyyup.ca. How can you better use your website? You have a lot of resources and a lot of tools on that site.
Yeah, well, and part of the goal is to make it as broad as we can as well. We want everyone to be able to utilize different resources, and I've seen everyone do it different. We do have a guide on our website, a Buddy Up guide that walks through of, why do you want to implement Buddy Up? Why do you think you need it? And it talks through the different elements and how do you best utilize it for yourself. Because as I mentioned in the beginning, like sometimes people just want to do an event and they want to raise awareness. Maybe it's something as simple as building gingerbread houses in your workplace. Simple things like that are building relationships do make an impact. Or maybe you want to, I've seen some organizations do Buddy Up committees where they plan events and then they regularly meet to discuss how they are implementing Buddy Up and how can they improve the resources that they have in their groups or workplaces. So there's lots of different ways to get involved, and we leave it a bit broad because we do work with so many industries. The construction industry may approach Buddy Up a little different than a clinic or something like that. So giving those resources, but really helping you create a plan that fits for your audience, because every audience is a little different.
And I think one thing we need to emphasize too is you're not asking people to subscribe. You're not asking people to, sign their life away or become a member of a club or something. This is education. This is conversation starting.
Yeah, and you can do as much or as little as you want with Buddy Up, and that's part of what we try to incorporate within it. That there's not a standard or a box that you need to fit in order to participate in Buddy Up. Everyone's kind of at different places when it comes to suicide prevention. Maybe you're not as comfortable, or your workplace or group or soccer league or whatever it may be isn't ready to have certain conversations or different levels of that. Or maybe you have experienced the suicide recently in your group, and how you would approach that is a little different than an organization that hasn't.
What would you want to say directly to someone, and who is it more important to talk to? Someone who can become a buddy and watch out for someone else, or maybe someone who needs a buddy? What would you say to them?
One, if you are struggling, there is help available and there are resources. Do talk to those around you, or if they're asking you, be vulnerable with them. It's not going to make you look weak. There is help available, and we do want you here. And you do have value. And for those that are looking to check in on their buddies, I think just have the conversation. If it's awkward, that's okay. It'll get less awkward over time, but it's important to check in. Maybe you're the only person that would have that conversation with that individual. I know there's lots of different components and parts to Buddy Up, but at its core, that's what is important to me. Talk to your father, talk to your brother, talk to your colleague, your soccer buddy, anyone. Like, talk to the men in your life and have those conversations.
It's an incredible program. It's called Buddy Up. It is buddyup.ca. It's worth checking out the website. There's a lot of resources there. There's a lot of ways to start the conversation as well. And I thank both of you for what you do.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
All right. Seth McVitie and Robert Olson from Buddy Up. And that is this edition of the Mental Health Podcast. Until next time, thanks for joining me. Take care of yourself and take care of each other.